Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. We're back again for another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. And today we're going to be talking a little bit more simply, because there's no surprises or anything, at least I hope there isn't, when it comes to Wakka and his LD, and that's going to come along with the next boss rush event. So we're going to talk about that and what characters you might want to bring along for it, as well as a horribly nasty final wave within that particular fight. So if you're interested in learning more about Wakka's LD, and obviously the fight that comes along with him in Boss Rush 3, then as always, stay tuned and keep on watching. Of course, as always, don't forget to check out all of my social media links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon. Now, normally, obviously, I stream 5 times a week over on Twitch, so if you would like to come and follow me on there and join me for Final Fantasy XIV twice a week, Final Fantasy Counter, where I've been playing through every numbered Final Fantasy title in succession, and we're currently playing through Final Fantasy IV, and obviously, I do cover every Dissidia event as they arrive, except for this week, where I've actually taken a week off. But, obviously, if you would like to come follow me on Twitch, it would be lovely to have you. And with regards to Patreon, I always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a new video, and today that person is going to be Nyx, who, as you can see in their title card, is a fan of Estinian, who's a character I'd honestly quite like to see come along to Dissidia, and so I think that he's got a heck of a following, and Dragoons are just cool, let's face it. And if you would like a title card just like Nyx here has, as well as other benefits including exclusive content, being a part of Would You Pull, being a part of voice chats we all do, and other things as well, then perhaps you would like to come and join in on Patreon and support me and my channel that little bit further, and it would be very lovely if you do. Of course, don't forget to check out all of the other content creators that are out there for Dissidia Opera Omnia, and all of the fantastic websites I have listed around me in the description box below for more resources relating to playing the game. So first things first, let's take a look at the banner that Wakka is featured on, as well as Wakka himself and exactly what it is he brings to the table. Now Wakka, he comes on a pretty interesting banner. So this is going to be your last chance to get hold of Ishtola's Burst for a start, which is a nice thing if you're perhaps lacking in it and you already have all of the other LDs that are present. It also features Charlotta and Setzer EX. Now this is kind of useful for the boss rush itself because it gives you some interesting options that I have seen clears using these two characters. Now they're obviously not characters you're going to want to chase down at this point, having only EXs, but they might be nice to have if you don't already have them. Now with regards to Wakka, Wakka is random, literally. Wakka has a lot of chance effects in his kit that I don't particularly like, but he's a very powerful aura bot in that he carries massive buffs and auras. Like he can do upwards of 100% on defense, max bravery, attack, and initial bravery with a brave regen. He's got some really powerful auras, and he does carry blind along for the ride as well. So like he has 50% chance of inflicting blind with his dark attack, and given that blind has a 50% chance of them missing, that's more like percentile chances and things like that. And then Brave Reels, which is actually a renamed attack that I didn't even notice because I've never really used Wakka up until this point because I only got his EX as an offshoot to one of the LD banners I'd pulled on. But I thought it was quite interesting to notice that his attack had changed name without me noticing. But that increases his bravery massively, and then after, it gives him all these really, really nice buffs as well so that you can get a hold of them all. However, they're not all 100% chance of getting those buffs, but he does give himself a huge attack buff. Like he got massive attack buff. But it's a generic attack buff, which means it can be pushed off by other buffs. And he gives himself 5 buffs in total, so you have to be very, very careful not to nudge them off with other things too well. So you do have to be careful who you use him with. But he does get HP attacks after he's used his Brave Reels. His Brave gain now buffs the party, and all of his kit actually batteries the party except for Dark Attack, so that's something to bear in mind as well. And his EX is actually pretty solid. His EX does a 4 HP dumping attack and batteries the party by a random amount between 100 and 200% of his attack stat, and it also gives him a buff that raises the party's initial bravery, max bravery, attack, and also gives the bravery gen I mentioned earlier. And Captain's Order is quite nice, and it's also got a really speedy recast rate, so if you're pairing him with characters like Sarah or Cecil or anything like that, he's going to benefit from those percentile damage buffs a lot. And then when you've got 3 out of 3, he starts with all of his buffs, which is good because it means he's not quite so reliant on daring reels or bravery. Great daring. I keep going back to great daring. It's not the name of the attack anymore. Brave reels in order for him to like start with all of those stats up, which is really nice. And he starts with his EX gauge maxed, which means that you're going to be getting attack reels off frequently. It also has another buff on it that's really powerful, but you only get 60% chance of getting it with 3 out of 3, which is attack reels. And that gives you Brave overflow limit for the party and more attack. So he does a lot of attack stat with his kit. And it, like, if in the perfect situations, he can give you a lot of stuff. And none of the stuff that he's giving you is bad either. Like, there's no negative rolls on his stuff, and that extends to his LD as well. You just might not get as much out of it as you might have liked. And then that brings me to his LD. So his LD is status reels. Now status reels is after LD boards, etc. a 10 hit brave HP attack with 100% bravery damage across the board, and it also inflicts a debuff called status reels. Now status reels gives the enemy a like increased bravery damage taken by 20%, and then after their turn it switches into various different modes of itself. So it either lowers the attack, defense, initial bravery, and max bravery by a whopping 50%, which is a huge amount of stuff to lose on a single debuff, or it freezes them so they can't gain bravery, much like Setzer's freeze did before, or it paralyzes them so they can't do anything. Now, none of these are bad. They're actually all very, very strong. However, I found this with Desh as well. When there's RNG involved with something like this, you tend to be after one of the 3 options in this case in particular, and you're not always going to get the one that you want. Normally, I really love freeze as a mechanic. I think it's very powerful. I think it allows them to act, do whatever they need to do. You can then respond to it however needed, and they get nothing out of it. Paralysis is obviously very strong, and the stat down is actually very strong as well. But within any given situation, I find that, at least myself personally, I'm kind of always hoping for one of them. Doesn't matter which one it is, but I'm hoping for one of them in that particular moment. And if I don't get that one, then I'm like, okay, now I have to replan around it. So therefore, I think that while Wakka's LD is really good, it does also give him a free skill use as well. After you've given him his LD boards, after you've done that, he actually gets free skill uses. So you get more uses of his brave reels, things like that, so he can actually continue the fight really well. And his HP plus is actually quite good as well. It's a 2-hit brave HP attack that batteries the party. And all of his stuff batteries the party, which is great. I just don't really like the fact that for 6 turns there's a debuff there that I don't fully know what it's going to do. I am one of these people that likes to have all the cards out on the table. I know exactly what's going to happen. Like I said, Desh gave me a similar issue where and that was what ultimately caused me not to pull for him. Because while you know that the paralysis isn't likely and you shouldn't ever plan around it, you know it could happen. So there's a part in the back of your head that thinks, well, hopefully it'll happen. And then when it doesn't, you're like, oh, okay. And then you carry on. And I feel the same way about Wakka. Like, Wakka's got so many powerful things going for him. He's got that really fast charging, multi-HP dumping EX attack, which is even faster charging because it starts loaded. You get everything out of, like, you can charge it with status reels. You get a really powerful debuff. Blind is a really nice thing to have, even if it's still random and percentile chance, and that doesn't do it for me either. But, you know, it's not even in compound like Kefka's blind is, where it comes with the HP silence as well. But so, like, I think that all of his stuff in the perfect scenario is massively powerful. And honestly, even when it's not the perfect scenario, he still gives you a lot of stats and battery and safety, which I do appreciate. But I also find the randomness of his kit quite off-putting. The other thing I will mention as well is, while I really do quite like Wakka's kit here, and I think a lot of people probably do quite like him, this is not the banner you probably want to be pulling him on. The next time he turns up will be with Setzer's LD. Now, Setzer's LD is going to be a big one for a lot of people. It turns up around the time that Tidus's LD in Burst comes out, and it's honestly backbreakingly powerful, and also happens to feature Wakka's LD on it. So honestly, if you're planning on pulling on that banner, which a lot of people are, and given that Wakka, while really cool and very, very built for Boss Rush 3, is a very powerful character, there might be a better chance for you to get him than this one. In terms of his call abilities, Wakka's actually really good. Like, Brave Reels on a character just before you go into a burst phase or something, because it raises all your stats quite heavily and batteries the party. The call effect is 80% attack, defense, and max brave up, which is not something to be sniffed at. And then you go to a burst phase and you've got loads and loads of attack going. Great stuff. Status reels, similarly, I think the thing that's important with status reels, despite the fact that it is random, you only actually get 2 turns of it with the cool ability, you still get the extra damage from it. There's still that extra bravery damage that a lot of LD calls have at this point, but there's different reasons to use them. Like Hope has it, but he obviously has the magic in peril. Jack has it, but he has it in slightly greater quantities. Well, Wakka has it, and he has it, but he also is accompanied by the status reels debuff as well. And a 10-hit Brave HP attack with 100% AoE damage ain't nothing to sniff at either. I actually think that Wakka's got a very powerful LD call. It's not the first thing I'd go for, because I don't think there's quite a lot of characters that have that extra bravery damage now on their LD calls. I don't think it's like a reason to pull for Wakka. But if you happen to have him, it's definitely one you might want to consider bringing along with you to a party. And then his high armor is support keystone, which is very take it or leave it as far as I'm concerned. Like, especially with Wakka, like if you're going to use Wakka a lot, sure. If you're not, don't worry too much about it. It's going to have another free pull with it. If you get him for free, fantastic. Take that LD call, take his LD to boss rush. If you can fit him into other parties, fantastic. But I wouldn't go for his high armor based on that alone. And then because he was an early character, attack stat, max brave stat, he's got massive buffs on his auras and stuff, might as well make the most of them, right? Okay, so now let's take a look through Boss Rush 3. Now this one is actually pretty difficult if you haven't prepared for it accordingly and gotten the correct characters for it. Now basically we've seen boss rushes before, you know how it works. 50 turns per team, you want to clear it with as few teams as possible, ideally 3 to get all of the rewards for it, and each of the waves has a Lufenia orb that's different from one another, except for wave 3. Now, Wave 1 in this particular case has the Crust Beetles. Now, Crust Beetles have always been a bit of a nightmare in the past because if they break you, they pretty much instantly kill you. And that's very much the case here. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to bring debuffing characters that have poison, sap, or any way of dealing damage really via a debuff. So characters like Firion, Trey, Celeste, Sarah, they're all going to be very useful for this. So basically you want to try and get hold of that as much as you can and making sure that you are able to tank whatever they're doing as well. Gladio is actually very powerful in this and showing his longevity even now because he can soak up a lot of the stuff that the Crust Beetles do and throw it back at them. And then that in combination with a character like Trey, you're probably going to get through that and most of Wave 2 without a problem. Now Wave 2 is the Guard Scorpions. Now this has a similar Lufenia orb to the one that we saw when Ishtola's Burst came out, which is HP heal by half HP or more in one skill and plus 5 turns for each ally healed. So for obvious reasons, you're going to want to bring along a character that can do that for you. So Ishtola, Aerith, Cecil, Rude, all very powerful options for this. And then the Guard Scorpions themselves will, at a certain HP thresholds, just cleanse all of their debuffs and go up to right up to the top of the maximum bravery, 99999, and you have to get rid of it. So you then have to get rid of that as best you can. So characters that can instant break are also very helpful here. So Ramza, Gabranth, characters like that, they're going to be really helpful for you to get through that as well. And then Wave 3 has the Celestials, which are the Tiamat knockoffs, so they're dragons, and they're basically just going to HP attack you a lot. There's no Lufenia orb or any messing about with this this one. You don't have to worry too much. Just use your first 2 teams to get up to this point. You need your second team really to be able to take out both wave 2 and 3, because the fourth wave is going to want a team specifically made to beat it. So as long as you can get through that, so you need to tank the first wave as best you can, be able to drain bravery like nothing you've seen before when it comes to the guard scorpions, and then with wave 3 you need to be able to survive and heal, but because you had healers in the first wave, then you should be able to get past it. The fourth wave in this is a nightmare. Basically, the snakes, the needle snakes, I think they're called, have this extra special effect, and it combines into the mechanic that they have as well. So basically, this is built around Wakka in that it wants you to have very consolidated debuffs so that you don't ever have more than 3 of them on the enemies at any given time. However, the Lufenia Orb requires that they have at least 2 on them at all times in order for the Lufenia Orb to tick up instead of down. Therefore, you have to make sure there are only ever 2 or 3 debuffs on the enemies at any given time. It has to be between 2 and 3, otherwise if it's less, the Lufenia Orb will tick down. If it's more, they immediately dispel them all, permanently buff their stats and kill you. So you have to maintain 2 to 3 debuffs at all times. The other thing they do with their needles, the special effect that they have, is that this has up to 3 levels and is taken down a level every time the enemy is broken. At 3 levels, they take half HP damage. At 2 levels, you take an HP damage aura, and it's a big HP damage aura. Like, while they've got that up, expect to be losing half your health every turn. Like, it's not cute. And then, as long as they've got at least 1, they get some stat buffs. And every time you break the enemy, and they regen bravery a lot as well in this fight as well, but every time you break them, the stat goes down a lot. But after a while, whether it's through turn count or HP thresholds, they're gonna just instantly snap their fingers, get themselves their needles buff straight back again, and then you have to deal with it all over again. So basically you need to be on top of the debuffs as best you can be, whilst also making sure you're able to take their bravery down enough that you can break them, and then therefore bring down their needles buff. Now there's various ways in which you can do this. So characters, again, that are like ice affinity, have an ice affinity because they're weak to ice, and I should also mention that none of the waves in this boss rush are able to be imperiled, so bear that in mind as well. But ice damage is the way to go with this fight. They're also heavily resistant to melee damage, so characters like Jack and Gabranth can work in terms of their instant breaks, but you're going to want an ice enchanter imperil along with you. Celes, Onion Knight, that will work. Celes is actually one of the 2 best characters for this particular fight because she has 2 debuffs in her kit already because of Lock and the debuff she gets from her LD, and that will trigger and deal ice damage and help with the breaks after they've tried to attack her. Maybe they'll proc last stand, but they'll still get broken, taking the needles debuff down or buff down a notch, and then you can start using instant breaks in other ways. You can also use Gravity. Ultimecia gets used a lot in this because of her decent magic damage, the fact that she can like be enchanted by, say, Onion Knight or Celes, and be able to just control the field as best she can and use her free turns to really sap away at that bravery, get that buff down, make sure that, and she has a debuff on her own as well. She has a framed sap debuff, so she can add to that as well. You need to be very, very controlled about which debuffs you take to this particular fight. There's actually a lot of characters. I plan to take Onion Knight personally, mainly because I want to make use of my Onion Knight. But like, as long as you can heal, obviously Stola is still the burst character, so she's still going to be very relevant here. Aerith is going to be really good. You've got, like I said, you've got Rude for the second wave. Like, healers are all going to be very good. Firion is still really good. Firion and like Trey, off-turn damage. Basically, all the different things you've always needed for boss rush, you just need to refine it down so that you can get around that last wave's mechanics, because they are nasty. So now, of course, we come to the should you pull portion of this chapter or of this video, etc. Now, Wakka is a weird one. I don't think Wakka's bad. I think that he's actually very good. He's got a fabulous LD call. He's got massive auras. Sometimes they proc better than other times, but they're still fabulous even if you don't get the full whack out of them. If you're really struggling with Boss Rush 3, then it is partly designed around Wakka, so maybe like you might want to try and pick him up. But I very, very heavily suggest against pulling for a character based on a single event. There are like if you've got other means of being able to clear Boss Rush 3, I'd honestly steer clear of this banner from a personal standpoint, even though I think Wakka is quite good. This is based on the fact that when he returns, the banner he returns on is infinitely superior to the one that he's on now. Setzer's LD is one that a huge amount of players are going to be pulling on because it's ridiculous, and it being featured with Tidus's burst is like a really big deal then as well, and it being an extra and something to look forward to and an extra reason to be excited for that banner, I think is worth skipping on this one. But it's also a weird thing when it comes to the character himself. Like, on one hand, even though there's random elements to the effects of his kit and his LD, etc., it's very rare that you're not going to get something you want out of it. But on the other hand, even though it's rare that I'm not going to get something I want out of it, there's random elements to his kit, and I might find that off-putting. I am of the camp that finds that off-putting. As I said earlier, I like to have all the cards out on the table in front of me. I try to mitigate the variables as much as I can so that I know what I'm going to be doing. It's not a case of whether I think it's good or bad what's going to happen. It's a case of being able to plan around what's going to happen, and Wakka does make that a little bit dicey. And then, of course, finally, it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to make your voice heard and let everyone know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and give your reasons as to why that might be the case. And as always, a massive thank you goes out to all of my patrons for casting their votes and giving their comments on Wakka and whether they plan on pulling for him or not. And I'm pretty sure that had we not had the foresight of Setzer's banner, this might have leaned slightly differently. But even that being said, I think this is very much a taste-based LD. Like, some people will enjoy the fact that there's random elements to it, and some people, like myself, might not. So going into the numbers, nobody has said that they're using gems on this banner. 29% of people said they were going to use over 100 tickets, 38% of people said they were going to use less than 100 tickets, and 32% of people said they were going to skip this banner. Now, personally, I'm going to be skipping this banner, and like, depending on free pulls, etc., I may like just use free pulls on it, and if I don't have Ishtola's burst by this point, I'm probably just not going to go for Ishtola's burst and then maybe token it later down the line when burst plus comes along. But I don't think I'm going to go chasing for Wakka's LD personally. Then going into some of the comments, JRPG fan says, going less than 100 tickets for this one, although could go more depending on how Trey treats me. The randomness of the LD debuff can be a little off-putting to some, however all of them are useful. He's still very useful in events where he's boosted, and new toys are always fun. Collector mentality is fine, you know, and that's like, you're right, there is nothing wrong with any of the stuff that he gets in terms of his kit, and all of the debuff effects are good, and that is very true. But as I've said numerous times on this video, for my own tastes personally, I would prefer it being slightly weaker, if anything, but consistent. Consistency for me is a key thing. Kendall McKenzie says, Wakka's most likely to be about 150 to 200 tickets. Overall, he's a pretty decent character, and he's personally a favourite of mine through the Final Fantasy series, so I don't mind going in a bit for him. Having multiple, though random, powerful debuff effects is pretty nice, and overall, he's not a bad character. I think that's my issue with Wakka, is not bad. And if you enjoy the character, absolutely, go nuts, do your thing, pull for him, do whatever you need to do. But in this day and age, when so many banners are so demanding on your resources, like everybody wants to be pulled for nowadays, concessions have to be made. And in my opinion, Wakka is one of the easier characters to make a concession for, and therefore sacrifice him for the greater good, especially if you could finish Boss Rush 3 without a problem. Cobalt Zork said Wakka's a weird one. His kit's kind of RNG heavy with the not guaranteed buff procs, which does drag him down a bit. Luckily with his LD, the RNG is more pick between these three good effects, so you know you're getting something good out of it. I'll put a few tickets his way unless my trade pools go really badly. I think even if my trade pools go really well, I'm probably still not going to pull on Wakka. It's nothing to do with dislike for the character or anything like that. It's just I have a real disdain for any kind of random effects. It's the same reason I didn't pull on Desh. Though that being said, I kind of regretted not pulling on Desh. So maybe there's a chance I'll end up regretting not pulling on Wakka as well. But I think that chance is slightly less, if I'm perfectly honest. And then finally, Gemakai says, skipping on Wakka. While his LD certainly helps him, he isn't a must-have, and since my resources have taken a hit, I'll just not worry about him, especially since he comes back soon, and with Setzer making it a better banner to gem on. This is why I'm not doing it, because I think that when Setzer's LD comes out, it's a good few months away from now, don't get me wrong. If you want Wakka, then you're going to want to pull for him now so that you get the most out of him. But I think that the way I see it is that as somebody who doesn't particularly care about Wakka, he'd be a great consolation prize for when I'm pulling for Setzer, because I'm sure it's no surprise to you guys that I'm going to pull for Setzer LD. So to get a consolation prize is like, oh, all right, an extra LD, and I'd be happy with that. So I don't feel the need to go for it now, but sound off in the comments below and let me know if you feel differently. So that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching. As I said just now, let me know in the comments below and let me know whether you plan on pulling for Wakka, whether you don't really feel that strongly about him. But again, if there's a free pull, if I were to get him in a free pull, I'd be really happy about it. I never look a gift horse in the mouth, and I will always take a freebie if I can get one. So don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making. And don't forget to check all those social media links in the description box below. And thank you all very much for watching. I shall see you in the next video or in the next stream as well. So thank you all again, and I'll see you then. Take care.